Okay, welcome back. This is it. Last one, last session of the conference. One, I want to thank big time Dan and Ash, and especially Ash. Dan has been doing with these with me. I think this is our 16th conference, 15th, 16th. We lost count somewhere. You've been doing these with me for 4 or 5 years. Ash came on literally the week before the March event last year. We threw her in. Oh, hey, Liz, we're gonna do a conference. And she was learning. And then, September of last year, she was getting a little more comfortable, but still like, all right, being careful. And then this week, I mean, absolutely knocked it out of the park. I was just telling Omar, it's a bit like watching your kids go to college because they didn't need me this morning. They were like, no, we got this. It's all good. We're fine. Don't worry about us. So I was like, okay. So anyway, with that, what we are doing now is a live version of something that happens every week, most every week. There are weeks that people are busy on our Discord server. The ones on our Discord server are Thursdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. They are not recorded. They are not public. These are pitch deck reviews. So what's going to happen? Omar and I have 2 decks pulled up that were submitted. Ding and Isa are with us backstage right now. We'll bring them in one at a time. We're going to go through the decks one slide at a time. Omar and I are going to give feedback, ask questions. And this is going to be up there for posterity's sake. So one big round of applause for those two for, having the strength and confidence to dump their deck out into the internet and let the whole world tear it apart. But yes, that is what we're doing. So with that, let me get everything rolling here and let's get started on our first deck. So we've got Zombie Rollers, The Last Ship, hey ding, from Zing Games. So, Omar, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I think I'll kick us off on this first slide. So when I saw this, I absolutely kind of love the artwork on the title page. I'm a big fan of making the first slide look like a movie poster for a game because this is the first time anyone's going to see your concept. So the colors are bold, it's visually strong. I like the logo, Zombie Rollers. You've got the last ship. You've kind of tied it in with a captain's wheel on the left row. It's really nice. But with that said, I still feel like there's a couple of things you could do to just tweak it a little bit. So I think the awards that you've got on the bottom, as cool and as impressive as they are, I think they could live like later on in the pitch. I think if either remove them or reduce the scale, and what they will do is give you a bit more height for the key art. And whoever's looking at this will kind of get more of a sense of like space in terms of this horde of zombies that are coming towards the ship. So yeah, I don't really have much more to say. I think by doing that, you'll basically have opportunity to kind of just focus in a little bit more on those key characters because it is a bullet hell, but it has some management / TD elements. So you want to focus on those. I think it will just help sell the concept a bit better. Yeah, Jay, did you want to add anything to that?
So I'm going to slightly disagree. I think the art is gorgeous. I like the art. I think it's too busy though. It's a little difficult to discern your ship right in there. So overall, yes, bold colors. I like it. It stands out. I would, if the game is going to be about that last ship, I would have it a little more prominent. I, on the other hand, while yes, I agree that the scale of the awards can be toned down. I like having them up front because it gets your attention. I mean, Michael was talking earlier about when you're doing your advertising, your pitch decks, your trailers, how you have if you don't have something to grab them right then, you can absolutely lose a publisher or an investor. This says, okay, I need to pay attention because there are multiple organizations that have, endorsed this. And the other good thing, and this is a mistake I see a whole lot of developers make, you have awards that are recent. you have, there are other pitches that we see and there's older awards in it. And it's like, that's fantastic, but it's not necessarily relevant right now. So yeah, that's that's mine. All right, let's go to slide 2. All right. So my comments on this slide are very simple. Too much red.
Yes.
And it's something that we see, through you'll hear us say this through the course of going through the document. You've got the red text on the red background is very hard to see. So you've got the stuff in there, you've got the information in there, but you need to work on the readability of some of that text. Omar?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think we have the same thoughts on this. There's a couple of things that I think you could do a little bit differently in terms of the layout. I think the statement you've got on the top, the first sentence, it's Tower on Wheels Zombies Survival Roguelike Game. That's your big statement. That kind of sums up what this is as a game, right? If you had to tell someone in 5 seconds what it is, that's what you would say. I think everything that follows is kind of like a smaller statement. So I would emphasize that. Totally agree with Jay. I think the overview description of the game, all those smaller headings, red text on red, doesn't really work. It's not great for legibility. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, Jay, but I'm a fan of putting these overviews toward, like, summarizing them as a summary slide and putting it in towards the end of the pitch deck, just as like here's a little refresher on everything you just saw, and then you sign off. I think putting it here right now is probably a little bit too much. It takes away from what you're trying to pitch as like the concept for the game. There's no right or wrong.
That's the way. Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't really have a preference either way. I mean, I'm going to lean towards, if I'm looking at dozens of decks a week, let me know up front that this is not like a mobile game or something that I'm looking at. But I'm not going to die on that hill. It's one of those that I think is fine either way.
Yeah. I did have one other thing to add as a suggestion. Where you've mentioned build turrets, command your crew, upgrade the ship. Those sound like 3 statements, like in terms of the key pillars of your game or USPs. You could have 3 images that represent those key statements here. So you could just have build, command, upgrade. And I'd probably put those headers somewhere above these images and also use images that are relevant to what you're trying to say. I think that would just help sell it a bit better. Assuming you want to change the layout of this slide based on what we've just said.
You ready? Next one.
Yep, go for it. Okay, so red on red again. I think there's a lot more red. I think what's really interesting though is that when you look at the game, the color branding is yellow, mostly yellow. So I don't know where the reds come from. I almost feel like that's easier on the eye. Red's a very bold color, very strong, usually for danger. You'd see it more for like, I don't know, mature titles, like, I don't know, something Devolver might sign. Here, I think you're going for something that's quite whimsical, quite light-hearted. So I think lean into the green and the yellow that you've got in your main branding. The other thing I was also going to say is that would these make more sense as like the differentiators for your game, the USPs that I just mentioned previously? So, I don't know, Hordes of Zombies is probably not a big USP, but ship management meets bullet hell shooter is really interesting. Procedurally generated map is more of a feature. So I don't know if you want to rework this to be a USP slide. And then I think it would make sense to probably use iconography, just be a bit more visual. I like seeing icons or kind of, I don't know, just images that represent the ship management, the hordes of zombies, the procedurally generated map. That's all I want to say about this. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jay?
No, it's one of those that this slide feels incomplete to me. It's like, okay, features, words, 1, 2. I don't think Hordes of Zombies is much of a feature these days.
No.
There's just so many zombie games out there. But this is something that ties back into the previous slide where you could use, like Omar said, the iconography or screenshots to show, okay, here's the ship management. Here's how you're fighting the zombies. Here's the procedurally generated map. And too much red. Yeah, that's all. That's all. Better use of the screenshots to give it something a little more visual, and replace hordes of zombies with something else. I mean, because
Yeah.
it's not going to stand out on its own as a feature in the market right now. All right.
Ooh.
So this is this one, like your ship management, that is a better thing than hordes of zombies, and so that was my comment on this one. Using the crews, that's a feature in and of themselves. The other thing is I would change the word turrets to weapons, because I'm going to steal some of Omar's thunder here, but you're making it sound like a tower defense game, not as an actual zombie run them over game. Omar.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. Totally agree. Totally agree with you. I think that was something I spotted, because when I started reading the pitch, I was like, okay, this is a bullet hell shooter with strategy. And then when I got to this point, I was like, oh, hold on, is it a tower defense now? So I think, yeah, be very mindful of words you use, especially when you're using terms that are established in other genres. So turrets, typically tower defense. So yeah, weapons. I don't know anything else that comes to mind, like Jay suggested. The other thing I was also going to say is that yeah, I totally agree with Jay that like the management is really interesting. So just kind of pull that out a little bit more. Talk about the crews. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. I mean, I know we've got a slide that follows, but what I would want after this slide is something which kind of breaks down these mechanics a little bit more. So something that's got I don't know, a slide called gameplay or core mechanics, and it kind of shows how you manage the ship while you're shooting, because in my head that sounds really frantic, chaotic, really difficult in terms of like switching between something that's high energy and something that's a little bit more slow and strategic. So yeah, I would suggest creating a slide which kind of breaks down how you play the game. Super high level, doesn't have to be like a game design document level. Like, it's just probably 3 images. It's like, here's how you pick your characters, here's how you assign the weapons, and this is how you switch between the two states while you're trying to survive waves of zombies. Yeah.
Next slide.
Cool. Okay. So I like this visual. It's really nice. I like the angle. It looks like I'm gonna get attacked by these hordes. But what I feel like it's lacking is information. I feel like the statement on the top is not really impactful. It's like cut through 20 types of zombies with different skills. To me, that just says we've got lots of enemies in our game. What would be more interesting is if you had, I don't know, if you called out some of these enemy types. Hey, we've got runners, we've got heavies, we've got ones that throw projectiles. That just makes it more interesting for me. And then, I'm thinking, wow, okay, this game has various types of enemies for me to contend with, which then rolls into the weapons that I need to place on my ship. So I need to pick the right weapons for the right types of enemies. So I think you should just pull that out a little bit more. I do like the art. I don't know if you can take a different screenshot, maybe with a lineup of enemies. But yeah, I do like the composition, but I think you just need to kind of talk a little bit more about these bad guys.
See, I think if you did a lineup screenshot, it wouldn't look nearly as compelling. It would look like he's dumped his character art into a screenshot.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you. What I mean is you've got like a semi lineup in front, right? So if you've got this big boss in the background, and then you've got 10 or 15 characters running towards the player, towards the camera, then you can kind of pull them out a little bit and say, look, here's a runner type, here's a heavy, here's a whatever. And you could just kind of have little pop outs. Yeah.
No,
that's
okay.
what I was going to suggest.
I agree. Mine is pretty simple and along the same lines on this one. I still contend that Hordes of Zombies is not a feature, but if you do, like Omar said, and change it to something along the lines of, here's the variety, 20 different types of zombies can be read as we've got, art swaps on the same thing, or it can be shown as, like we're talking about, there's literally 20 different types, and show that variety in there. I think that would be a better punctuation mark on this than just saying there's a lot of zombies you got to go through.
Yeah. Especially when you've got procedurally generated levels and you're randomizing these enemies, and the waves are going to be unique, or they'll feel unique because you've mixed them up. Maybe you can talk about how the waves are like, yeah, they will they'll be up and down in terms of like intensity and challenge.
All right. So I like this one. What is taking me away from it is there's no sense of how big these maps are, and it kind of plays into a theme throughout the rest of the deck. How much gameplay am I actually going to get out of this? If I'm a publisher, if I'm an investor, and I'm putting money into this, what's the total thing? So the fact that they're procedurally generated is great. The fact that you've got 4 samples down there, I'll let Omar touch on that a little more. But from what I want to see is how big are these maps? How long is it going to take you to play through them? Does each one equal a level? Are they interconnected? Give me more information about how this fits into the bigger picture of the game. Yeah, that's it. That's my stuff.
Yeah, and I was going to say I do like how you've kind of broken it down into levels are going to have these things in them, but I don't think there's enough just from these thumbnail shots. I kind of just interpreted, and this is just me kind of throwing some ideas out there. So if you've got like a desert biome, you've got a lava biome, you've got like a medieval one, then you've got forest. I'd almost want to see something like Jay says, like an image just to represent scale, but something to say in the desert level, there'll be obstacles, there'll be storms that will obscure your shooting gameplay, so you need to avoid them. If you're in the lava level, there are volcanoes, there's magma, so there's obstacles. You need to kind of navigate around these streams of magma. And then if it was the forest, it will be rivers, there'll be lots of trees, there'll be obstacles in the way. So whatever it is that makes each biome unique and distinctive, you might want to just kind of call out how they differ. And then for me as a player, I'm like, cool, every level is going to feel a little bit different. I'll have to mix up my strategy. Maybe I need to have a different build for the forest. And then I have to, once I've done that, and then I have that kind of brief respite period where I've got to check my build and then go into the next world. I think that would be really interesting. And I don't think I've got much more to add to that, really. Yeah.
We're chugging. We're killing this. All right.
Yeah. Let's keep going.
All right. You want to kick this one off?
Yeah. So I'm going to say something a little controversial because gas, whenever I see that, it makes me think of free to play, makes me think of purely online games. And I feel like that terminology is a little bit confusing for this premium product, because essentially what you're talking about is here's a premium game, but we'll support it with downloadable content. We'll have events. We'll have all these other things. But opening with that statement, games as a service, is kind of like, no, it's a free-to-play game. So now I'm confused as a reader. So I would probably suggest, I don't know, giving it a different name. I don't know, like post-launch content or, content roadmap. And then start talking about each of these specific things. And with that said, each of these specific things, I think some of these are not really that outstanding, if you don't want me saying. Collections, collect badges, it's not really as appealing as I would like. And that should just tie into leaderboards, in my opinion. If I'm performing well, I get some kind of reward. Season pass is interesting, but you've not really talked about what that would be. I know you talk about it a little later, but there's nothing here that's teasing what that would include in terms of content. It's like characters, new ships, new biomes, etc. So yeah, I just think probably emphasize the leaderboards a little bit more. I think, Jay, I'm going to say this right. Just before this call, I was playing Fortnite because I know you and I, we haven't synced up for a while. I'm on 153 level now.
Good so God, dude.
Yeah, dude, I'm playing with my kids. They are so good. Like, we have our squad now, and I'm like, they're killing it. So the reason why I really like the Fortnite approach is to quests and objectives is that they have dailies, they have weeklies, just like they do in mobile games, but they're very bite-sized. Like, every time I log in, I can do a little quest. I can do a match quest, and then it's like I'm working towards the bigger milestone. So I think flesh those out a little bit more, and that adds to the leaderboard system and it makes it more competitive. So yeah, just pull those things out. Yeah, what are your thoughts, Jay?
From my side, this is one of those slots where you need to make a decision on your tone and also make a clear delineation. So yes, Lamar's right. Fortnite has dailies, but you know what had dailies first? World of Warcraft. And so it's a lot of these things going back, and some of the way it's like the collections and the leaderboards thing reminds me immediately of like Monopoly Go. And so I'm in this like free to play mobile mentality. Pre-orders and bundles, they're not really going to ensure your game's longevity as much as they're going to be ensuring pre-launch revenue, which can also be refunded. So there's not a lot in there. You know, I agree. I would focus on what is going to keep the players coming back day after day, week after week, and playing this without making it sound like a free-to-play gotcha game.
Yeah.
All right, Omar, I'm going to kick to the next slide, and I'm going to let you start it so I can let my assistant out.
Okay, cool. So, season pass. I feel like the paragraph just underneath it is a little bit wordy. You're essentially saying our game's got season pass. I would probably put more emphasis on those individual chunks that you've got, which are potentially in order for a roadmap. I don't know if you'll be delivering content this way, whether you'll prioritize a new mode first, then you'll have maps, and then you'll have new turrets or weapons, and then heroes. But yeah, I just think pull those out. Show how meaty they are. What really helps when I sometimes do these kind of slides on other projects is excuse me, if you have I need my water. 1 second. Right, excuse me. The way I like to pull these out is by showing kind of major content and like minor content. So what you want is players to look forward to like the big chunky content that's going to drop. So it's like modes, biomes, and then the minor content is like skins, very lightweight vanity items. So I think if you kind of show that, it kind of it'll give the player or the reader an indication of where your weighting is and where your efforts will be spent, and what's low cost. You know, for a publisher to look at that, it's like, oh, we can do tons of vanity items. You know, these really connect with the players. They should be quite easy to churn out. But we need to spend 2 months or 1 month per biome plus a game mode. I would just kind of add a little bit more detail there.
From my side, I would remove the slide completely. Because it doesn't add a lot of value to me. You don't go into any specific detail on what a new mode might be, what a new map might be, how new turrets could be different. If anything, merge with the previous slide, take out some of the things like your pre-order or the collection and make it one big slide about, hey, look, our longevity is going to be based on a season pass. Season passes have been around long enough that people have a decent idea of what's going to be in them, but then use some of the space to outline exactly what kinds of new modes you're going to be going for instead of just having generic drops. And then finally, also, it's red again.
Yeah, it's red. It's so red. One thing I wanted to ask, actually, a quick question for you. Have you guys thought about multiplayer? Because this kind of game makes me think of another game, Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time, which is fantastic. It's like a cooperative. I know it's a ridiculous name. Fantastic game. You have basically four players. I think it's 4 players in a ship, and the ship moves through space. But you run up and down ladders, and one person mans the turrets, one mans the shield, one steers. I could see you kind of creating a game mode where you take away the NPCs and you allow 4 players to jump in, and you've got one person who's kind of controlling movement, another person who's moving between shields, another person who's moving between guns. That could be awesome. I just thought I'd throw it out there because it just came to mind when I saw it. I was like, oh, that would be an awesome mode. That would add longevity to it, definitely. Are you shaking your head? Are you processing? You're like, He's thrown a massive feature at me, and I don't know if he can make it.
Yeah, actually, the team has something similar before, but based on the how many people we have and the experience we had before, we don't have a lot of experience with multiplayer mode. Even some other publisher can ask about it, and so based on the time and the budget, that kind of thing, I think we focus on what we quite confident for now, and later maybe we can do more based on this kind of like a new gameplay. Yeah, so it's the designer side and the production side fighting all the time. Yeah, so that's what we're facing.
Well, the thing is, like, I like seeing presentations and pitches where there is something that suggests we can do this if you help us out. Like, the ultimate wish list is we want to get a multiplayer mode in, and these are our thoughts right now for what that multiplayer mode could be, but we can't do it. If you inject a little bit more in terms of investment, or if you fully fund us, we can get it in, but it'll come after launch. It'll be a big meaty update. And that sounds really compelling to me, because then you've got a mode which is like it's more social focused, right? I know it changes the game, but it's an independent mode. And social games, cooperative shooters are huge. I mean, everyone's talking about Helldivers right now, right? I've not played it, but that sense of working together as a squad, fighting waves of enemies is really, really compelling.
Given that Helldivers has friendly fire, I know exactly how that's going to end up for me and my friends.
Can't you turn it off? That's what everyone's talking about. You can turn it off, right?
Well, that would take the fun out of it.
What's
the fun in shooting my friends if they're not going to die? All right, slide 9. So my take on this is some of this can be actually merged with even something like slide 2. Your target audience. I'm just reading my notes here. Bear with me. The audience could be merged with some of the points on slide 2. The audience pool isn't really key information for a lot of publishers. They're going to do this research on their own, and you basically just got really big numbers there without any context. And it's great that you did this, and that is the good part. It shows that you went to the effort of looking at it, but it doesn't add a whole lot of value in that slide. A better use would be to show more detail on these Facebook tests you ran, because not a lot of developers do that. And that is a huge feather in your cap that you have gone and done this research. I would focus more on that bottom half of this slide and make the top half is something else, because being able to show this is what we tested on Facebook, maybe show the videos, that shows a level of commitment and business savvy that you don't see from a lot of developers when they're pitching to publishers and investors.
I totally agree with you. I had similar notes. In my opinion, the way it's set up right now, it's a very weak slide. I know why it's in there. There are so many developers who follow this format, and every week, and I think I've won Kimberly over now, and I've convinced her that the slides where people put in like, this is how many units we're going to sell, and this is how many these units these games sold. I'm like, you're going to give that to a publisher. They're going to do that research straight away. So that data is not meaningless. It does show you've put effort into fact finding and basically doing your research, right? And making sure that there is potential to bring this game out. But I'd rather see something which is more about like, here's our product positioning. Like Jay says, like we did the testing on Facebook. Maybe we did A/B tests and present it as a little infographic. This is how long a typical session lasted. This is how far players got. This is what they were spending most of their in-game currency on. We've realized we need to make more biomes. This really clicked with players. So seeing that is way more meaningful, way more insightful, in my opinion. Cool. And I'll kick this off. Similar thoughts. First of all, I will say this. If you're going to have data, put the links in, put the references in. I don't know where you've sourced this from. The other thing I would say is that I don't feel like you need the comparison games on the left presented in this way with an array and how many sales they've had. Most publishers should be able to recognize Cult of the Lamb, Enter the Gungeon. These are like benchmark games. What I would prefer to see is what you've done on the right-hand side. Make that array a little bit bigger show where your game is positioned, maybe have a little breakdown underneath. And, if you had like here's a spectrum of our target audience. We think we sit here with casual to mid-core. We'll click with mobile players and kind of players who are just new to like console experiences, which are a little bit more challenging. I think something like that is way more useful, and it shows that you're thinking about where your game will be, where you're trying to carve a niche, rather than saying, hey, there's all these other success stories, we think we could be a success story as well. Because I don't know if that's enough, right? There are too many imitators out there. So show me why your game's unique.
So my issue is less of the layout, although I do agree having that matrix array is more effective than having the columns. My issue is the games that you've chosen.
Yes.
In the industry right now, anything over 2 years is completely irrelevant. So some of these games are much older. Their numbers, they might have been sold in the 80s. I mean, because the industry moves that fast with everything. So stick to games that have been released in the last 2 years. Put some games in there that fit with what you're doing thematically and genre-wise, not just games that have been huge sellers. And I know, Bomber Crew's in there on the smaller end of that scale, but have more variation in there in terms of, there's very successful games that have sold 400,000 copies because their budget wasn't that high, but focus more on recent titles and how they fit in with the genre and the atmosphere of the game thematically, more so than pulling these big titles that sold millions and millions of copies. I'm not.
You know what my comment is, right?
I know. I'll let you do that
anymore,
one.
Right? I don't even know red anymore.
It's not red. No, you're right. It's not. But the time frame on this, when you're looking at the Steam public demo Q1, I mean, is that demo already ready? Is it already out?
Not yet. Going to be around GDC and PAX East.
Okay. So I would actually just go ahead and kick that. If it's not going to be out before GDC, don't say Q1, because frankly, no one's going to look at it until after everybody gets back from GDC anyway.
Yeah.
Adjust that time frame just simply because we're already in there and you need to be planning ahead anyway. Or that's really my only thing on this one. I mean, aside from what you're going to say.
Yeah. I mean, the color. It's the only time you've changed the format. I think what you need to show is exactly where you are along the roadmap. Sometimes you got to remember that when decks are submitted to me, I kind of lose track of when they were submitted, and a month might go by, a couple of months might go by, and I'm like, where were they when they sent this to me? So I think, pinpoint exactly where you are. And I think just, show me a breakdown of kind of just elaborate a little bit more in terms of like what's happening during this timeline. Are you like halfway through development? We've got to do 2 more biomes. So do you call that out? It's like, 2 more biomes left, or we've done 60% of the weapons, or, whatever I need in terms of like that I can pass on to my production team and say, this is how far they are into development. They've got something that's like a vertical slice, but, they've got lots of levels left to build, and we'll need estimates for how long it'll take to build each one. So just call those out. I think you could probably just put like a vertical line, put a little kind of like summary next to each.
I would take out the second and third bubbles completely. I mean, they're irrelevant. I mean, you've already done them. It's passed. You're looking at a new demo, and then scoot that Steam public demo bubble further to the left and give some detail in between Steam public demo and release, because right now half of your timeline is taken up by 9 months, and then you go Steam demo and a year later, and then a year after that, or you're almost a year after that. So I mean, I would leave that first playable in there as a way of saying, this is when we hit this milestone. Take out the next 2 bubbles, they're irrelevant. scoot the fourth one down further and put some more detail in between what you're doing in Q1 2024 and Q1 2025.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. And this, I think we can do multiple slides in one go, because this slide, the one that follows, and then the one after this, I think, yeah. Oh, and this one. So there's 4. There's too many slides here on awards. I think you can merge all of them into one. It's like I said at the start of the call. I suggested pulling out the icons and maybe putting them in later. Jay's right. They do look strong on the title page. So if you want to keep them there, I would probably just pull out images of some of the big events you went to, put a few logos next to them, and then just show awards and what the takeaways were from each event. That's it. And all of that can live on one slide, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. But best case, one slide. Worst case, take them all out. Make one big slide in there. But yeah, you don't need 4 different slides with awards and all that sort of stuff. So on the who we are thing, stating that you've got a sister company that could provide artists doesn't really give a lot of value, especially when you say that there's 50 plus artists there. Without going into detail about who this sister company is, that sounds like a sweatshop. I have, it's hard to say, is that quality? Do you have 50 college students? Being able to dump 50 artists into a game is a lot for a game this size. And so I would, either leave that part out if you can't detail it, or go in and say, this is why that's relevant. Just focus on your leads and be clear on the platforms. 10 plus projects for most major platforms, that can literally mean different things to different publishers. So, go through and say, this is what we've done. This is what it was on. But if you're going to put the stuff in there about the other company, make sure you put context in there, or just take it out completely.
Yeah, I think we've got the same notes on this, Jay. I totally agree. I said, if you're going to mention the sister company, then put detail in. But if there isn't that kind of level of detail that you can share, then yeah, take it out. The other thing I was also going to say is, I like to see breakdown sort of like key team members, like founders or leads. If you can't, I mean, if the team's really big, you don't want to get every single member on there. But I want to know what your role is. Do you have a lead programmer? Do you have a head of design? Do you have an art director? Then it's like, okay, cool. You've got the pillars in place, and you need to ramp up, and then you need to hire the relevant people, or are you outsourcing? That kind of stuff is really interesting to me. Just getting an indication of, what you guys have worked on before. I know you cover that in later slides, but I think that's how you kind of tell the story of where you've come from and what you can do. One thing I was going to say, Jay, something I think I missed, I had it in my notes, that there is an important slide that's missing in your deck, which is your ask. So I don't know. Typically,
I think that's because we're public.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, so, well, that's the other thing I was going to say, is that you don't want to share that information here on the call. But the ask slide, where would you put that? Would you be putting it before this, or would you be putting it after this?
I probably before that. I think ask how much money and how we spend it going to be more important. That's how I think, yeah, because I already present the game, we already have a playable demo, that kind of thing, prove actually can do it about this project. So after the roadmap, the amount that we're going to ask, then this is going to be more like, okay, why we can do it, what to make the publisher confident actually we can do it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I guess I just wanted a bit more information. I know that was omitted for obvious reasons, but I just want to know that when you present that information, are you getting it on one slide? Like, you're breaking down your disciplines, how much you need, and then an overview of the budget breakdown, or a link from the pitch to an Excel document is pretty good. A lot of devs do that now. I like seeing that because I can just forward it to my production team. I think that would be good to see. But yeah, if you guys are already doing that, great.
All right, so for this one, you've fallen into the trap that I was talking about earlier about bringing up older stuff. That second line of icons down there, I would take it completely out. It doesn't really provide any context. It's not benefiting you in any way, shape, or form, because you're not necessarily saying we did this there. It's just like, hey, look, these are, and I get it. Those are the places where you've been awarded or you presented and you have feedback or whatever, but you're not adding any value. And the same to an extent on the row of icons in front of it, because aside from Mr. Runner and the Zombie Rollers Pinball Heroes, those middle 4 icons, I have no idea what that is. I mean, I am assuming these are other games that you've done, but again, without some context in there, what platform they were on, what the name of the game was, they're not really adding a lot of value other than taking up real estate and, adding some new colors to the slides. Which slide are we on? 16, 17.
Do you want me to add
mash up
to
the
this?
games with the links? I might have got ahead of myself on that one, but that's my main thing. You've got a lot of context. You've got a lot of icons in there that just don't really provide any value.
Yeah, I think when you said match up the games with the links, I had similar. I basically said put like, if it's Mr. Runner, put underneath like iOS released 2019, whenever, and then this is how many downloads we got. Yeah. And the next one, this is the platform. Here's a link. How many downloads we got? And then that will tell a nice story of progression. Hopefully, if there is that progression of like, we've grown over time, we've got a big player base, we've transitioned from like mobile to doing more premium games. And something that's just occurred to me now, I should have put in my notes before. You haven't established original IP. You've not really mentioned that elsewhere, because Zombie Rollers, Pinball Heroes, Zombie Rollers is an IP, right? Yep. So you need to call that out somewhere early on in your pitch.
Because you have an established audience.
Yes.
It's valuable. All right, cool. Last slide.
Embed a link to the demo here if you can. I assume you have a demo because you guys are ready. You're going to have it ready soon. Something I think people are listening, it's too much friction for a publisher to like have a deck and then say, there's no link here for a demo. I've got to outreach now and I've got to talk to this dev just to request a demo. Just drop a link, put it into the pitch deck. Publisher can quickly evaluate and decide if they want to outreach. So yeah, I would put that link in there. Just link it to G Drive or Test Flight if you're using it through iOS. And then I'd probably put a closing tagline, which is just that line you had at the start, which described what the game was, just at the end. Put your contact info in as well, because who's going to be the main point of contact? I'm not just going to send an email into the ether. I want to know like who it's going to. It's going to you. Is it going to the CEO? What's their role? Is that my main point of contact?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, this is going to publishers, not content creators. If you're sending something to content creators, then I will always encourage you to not just send them a demo to say, contact me or let us know if you want a demo. But this is going to publishers. Your publishers are looking at dozens, if not hundreds of games a week. You don't want to have to make them stop and go do something else. So go ahead and put the link in there. Put the name, who am I contacting? And I would actually, if you've got an active Discord, if you've got some good social media, put the links in there, put the links there for that as well, to show that you've got a community built around this. But I mean, that covers it. I mean, do you have questions before we bounce to the next one?
Not really. I really appreciate you guys provide all this detail. There's something, from different kind of view. It's hard to have a chance to actually listen. Yeah, so thank you guys so much about this opportunity.
That's our pleasure. I just want to make sure it's not too painful. We have to do like every week we do a session. Kimberly and I at the end, we're like, are you okay now? Is that too much? it's like are you still like publishers?
I was told early in my career that I had made a career out of telling people that their babies were ugly. So, it's okay. Sometimes babies aren't pretty. But yeah, and if you've got any questions, one, I will say this is not easy. You have just jumped out here, put your stuff in front of God and everybody and told 2 people to tear it apart. And I appreciate you doing that, because you're not only, this is hopefully good for you, but this is welcome to so many other developers out there. But yes, thank you, Ding. If you have questions, follow up with us. Let us know. But we're going to bounce over and to Issa, and hopefully we haven't terrified her to the point that she's going to run away yet.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, let me click a bunch of buttons. Issa, are you there? Are you okay with what you just saw? Are you?
Yeah.
I'm now afraid.
You suddenly wanting to get out of this?
Don't be afraid.
What's the worst that could happen?
The time is running out.
Oh, no. We're good. We're
Okay.
gonna
Okay
go,
for time.
unless Omar face plants in his keyboard, we're gonna do this. We're gonna power through it.
Not yet.
Do you want to start? Do you want me to start?
I can start. So, I think that some of the art here, like the character designs, are really nice. Quite illustrative art style. The female character in particular. Already looking at it, I'm like, cool. It's a fantasy game. But then it gets a little bit weird because I've got these slightly abstract looking creatures on the bottom left. And then it says magical harvest on the top left, but I'm not really seeing anything in this key image which alludes to harvesting, farming.
There's a basket of vegetables.
Yeah, but it's so like, if that's what the game is about, it's so kind of like tucked in a corner, but it's like it should be prominent, right? If she should be holding a basket of vegetables, she should be like, hey, and then it's like there's a farm behind you, it's like all of that needs to be put into the whatever your composition will be. So yeah, I think yeah, that's something to look at. The other thing I would say is as well, your game logo is like top left. Try and get it more center, get a bit bigger. And also your company logo is right next to it, which is a very odd placement. Like it almost looks like Moon Flame Games is like a subheading of Magical Harvest. So I would separate the two. Probably just tuck that on the bottom right. Don't need to worry about your company logo so much.
My feedback is even simpler. Make the logo for the game bigger, centered. Move your company logo down to the bottom right.
That's exactly what I just said.
No, you just said move it. You didn't say where.
I said bottom right, and okay. Yeah, you can tell now. We're like 50 minutes in, so by the end of this, we'll be at each.
We used to do this
yeah.
every week.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to preface them. I'm going to give you a bit of foreshadowing here. You do something well in this slide that you don't do well in the rest of the deck. You have a variety of colors that are distinguishable in a screenshot. We'll get into that. But just keep that in mind. All right. There's a lot here. So this is, let me scroll down. It's very busy. It's hard to actually figure out what the meaning of all of this is. The magic icon isn't clear because you've got like stars in a background of stars. And so it kind of blends in. It doesn't really stand out. You use the 3D block a couple of places in this deck. I just don't like it. It looks, that looks like a physics experiment. And that's not what we're doing here. I think there's other ways that you can articulate. From the high level, I completely get what you're trying to say. This is Stardew Valley. You've got some crossbreeding in it. There's magic and it's in 3D. But that's not coming across in this slide because it's so busy yet non-descriptive. But same, it blends into the background. So does the cow, assuming that's a cow.
It's a magical cow.
It's a magic cow. But yes, it's a lot going on. It's very busy, and it's not clear what it is.
Yeah, I have the same comments. I'm going to suggest something, and I'm a big fan of this. I call it a lot of devs use the X meets Y, or I like to use X meets Y meets Z. It's Stardew Valley meets whatever, meets magic. And then you have this plus this plus this gives you Magical Harvest. And then each of those games underneath, you just break down what it is you're pulling from those games that inspire or combine to make your game. Jay's laughing.
I'm laughing at the comment, not you.
Oh, okay.
Thomas wants to know how he gets his game pitch roasted, and I'm like, it's not roasting, it's feedback.
It's constructive feedback. I've been on the other end of this, Issa. I will tell you that now, and I still can be on the other side of it. But yeah, I think what I can see what you're doing, exactly what Jay says. I just think the composition, the background, I think I would change that. I would do an X meets Y meets Z, which is essentially what you're trying to say here, but you've kind of thrown it into one pot, and it's just a little bit confused.
Literally into one pot.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, try that as a layout. If you want me to kind of give you some points on that, if you want to drop me an email, I can kind of help you with that. But just kind of frame what that would look like. But yeah, try it. Cool. Okay. Sorry, my iPad's just locked me out. 1 second. So first of all, and I'm going to say this now because this screenshot makes an appearance throughout the pitch deck and has slightly different forms, day and night versions. I don't think it's the strongest image for this game. If your game is about harvesting and magic and magical animals, show me the farm, show me the harvesting, show me that key image which sells this game. Right now, you've got a character by a lake, and if I had no context and I'd be like, is this an adventure game? Is it, is it, I don't know, is it a life sim? I can't tell. So I think you need that kind of, the composition of those things would really help to sell it. The other thing I was also going to say is that the word technical as a heading doesn't really make sense for this slide. I know it's more of an overview, right? You're talking about this is a cozy farming game, single player. This is the game engine we're using. I don't think that's the right heading. If it's going to be an overview slide, just call it like an overview. Also, you've got a Steam page, which means you will have a trailer for this most likely. Embed that here, and make a big deal of the fact that it's got a Steam page. Because right now, I can't really notice it. It's on the bottom right. So yeah, those are my comments.
So it's too blue. That
Yes.
and this is what I was alluding to on that first one. It is literally difficult for me to see the UI and really get a sense of what's in the screenshot, because everything in the environment is a shade of blue. And so this goes deeper than the slide deck, but there needs to be some variation in there so the players know, what they're actually looking at. The UI needs to be bigger and bolder. It literally gets lost in that environment. And I would actually move the Steam page link to the end in your call to action stage. Omar may not agree with me, but I think it's good to have it all there at the end. But you're right. You do have one. You should have a trailer. We can look at Steam pages later, but I would move it. I don't think it's necessary at this stage of the deck.
Yeah. I don't disagree with what you said there, Jay. I just think the trailer is probably more important. Like, if you've built a trailer, if I see that early on, it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the presentation, and then everything else makes sense. Yeah. Did you want to do this one?
Yeah. So, and this, I'm going to use a bit of foreshadowing this one because this is like one of my themes that goes through the deck. What you're really missing at the heart of a lot of these slides is the how and the why. And this is like the first example that comes up. There's nothing in your description here in terms of features that doesn't exist at least in some other best in breed title. Whether it's Stardew. Now you've got, like it or not, Pow World is a competition. It's not a full blown cozy game, true, but it is what we refer to as genre adjacent. People that play Stardew, people that play, Pokemon, people are playing Pow World. And so the breeding isn't necessarily, new. The farming isn't new. You need to be focused on, these are the, aspects that make my game stand out in the genre. And there isn't anything in here as it stands that goes, okay, that's it. And it could be the one thing that makes everything stand out is that you're pulling all of this stuff. Let's face it, Power World does nothing unique, literally nothing. And I get the biggest kick out of that game because it is literally the example of what Omar said earlier with the X plus Y plus Z. It's Pokemon plus Arc plus Zelda, literally down to the UI. But it works. And that's what makes it unique. You don't necessarily have to invent an entire new magic system, to make this game stand out. But you do need to do a really good job of saying, this is why it's different. And that's what I'm going to touch on at least several points through these slides, is really focus on. I almost hate using the phrase unique selling points these days because it is so hard to have a unique selling point. The best example I can give you is Fortnite. Being a battle royal is not unique. Dropping people onto an island, having them compete with a storm or some other environmental entity that's trying to kill them, not unique. Those are all features. What makes that game unique is the building and destruction of, player-made item buildings all the way through there. That's that unique selling point. That unique selling point is a phrase we made up 20, 25 years ago when you actually could do things that were unique. Now it's more about what makes my game different than other ones in the genre. And even if there's not a new anything in it, but you're bringing them together in a different way, that's what you need to focus on.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's funny, I had this chat the other day with my team, and we were talking about life sim games. And there were a few that I was looking at, and my team were like, yeah, but it's not doing anything new. And I'm like, you guys are forgetting that this genre, the innovation is generally quite low. A lot of those games are very similar, but the ones that stand out are the ones that do certain things really well and really embrace those key differentiators that they have. It's just like Fortnite. It's different now because now they've got another USP, which is we have all the licenses in the world in our game. Nobody else has that. So it's like, I'm going to jump in and play as the Hulk versus Captain America in a battle royale. Where else can I do that? Nowhere. So I think, I agree with Jay. I would just give you a couple of pointers. I think the one thing I like on the top, you've got a paragraph, which is Magical Harvest is a cozy fantasy farming game in which you evolve crops and crossbreed animals. I think what you need is like why, the how and why. It's like, why do I do that? And I think everything else you could kind of lose. And I would probably put in those differentiators underneath. I've got suggestions. I'll talk about it later on as well in the pitch. But yeah, I totally agree with Jay. I think you just need to hone in on what makes your game a little bit different. Cool.
This is quick.
You don't need this.
Yes.
There is no mention of USPs. Lose it. So now we're starting to get to features. Do you want me to do this one, Jay?
Yeah, go ahead and start because I'm putting I'm multitasking.
Okay, cool. So I think if this was going to be a USP slide, this is where it would be. Like, I had ideas and I was thinking, like, could you talk about the magic? Like, does it activate at certain times? Like at night, the magic changes and only certain creatures will appear that you can crossbreed. And then when it's daytime, those creatures disappear, but then you have different animals that appear. And then it's like, ooh, the crossbreeding with those is different. And then that got me thinking about the pollination system in Animal Crossing with the flowers and how addicting that is. So, that is a nice spin on kind of mixing up like magic systems based on day-night cycles, for example. Maybe there are certain crops that you can only grow in certain, day-night cycles or certain seasons. That already is interesting. And then that gives the player reason to play through the game on certain days, certain times, because then they'll have different animals. But then it's like, what do I gain from having all these different animals? Well, they will then probably poop magical poop, which will then allow you to grow more magical crops of different types. So that resource system has to tie into it. And the reason why I say that is because in the Harry Potter universe, there is a calf which does that, has magical poop. So yeah, that's quite whimsical. It's quite silly, but you've got to have that kind of play loop in your game. And I think it's just not coming through at the moment because it's just like, here are things you can do, but Why am I doing them? What's the purpose, and what's the reason to keep doing them? So yeah, I just wanted to call that out. Bit random, but I felt like I had to say it.
So along the same lines, the screenshot to me on this slide adds no value because it's really not that much different than the other screens that you're showing throughout the deck. I would much rather, you've got a nice variation of characters there. Show me a very nice detailed variation of creatures. When you're looking at the 5 different points in there, 0.4, 5 different species to play in romance, no chibi looking models. I will confess, I'm not exactly sure what a chibi looking model is. I have a decent idea, but off the top of my head, I couldn't point one out. But that's not really a feature. That's I don't know what it's a thing. It's a point, but it's not necessarily a feature. And number 5 needs to be fleshed out more. But it's like, how does it change? What makes it different? One of the things about Stardew that is both infuriating yet keeps you coming back forever is, I mean, you just go on social media. I mean, I know back in the day it used to be on, I forget the exact one, but it's like all of these charts, go Reddit, whatever. Everybody's got charts. If you want to catch this fish, you have to do it this day at night in this weather. All of that sort of stuff. It's like it's infuriating at the same time. It's like, oh my God, I have to be doing this. Putting that level, if you were to show in a slide that you have that level of detail in there, it would be a huge benefit.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it's basically the fear of missing out. Games have missable events. Like in your game, there are things you miss, right? If you're not there. Like Animal Crossing does it with the shooting stars. Got to be under the shooting stars, and if you do it, hit the button. Great. One thing you've mentioned in your pitch as well is talking to characters. So Stardew Valley is all about building relationships as well, right? So in this game, are there certain humans who, if you befriend them or if you romance them, unlock a new magic system or a subsidiary of your main system, which then allows you to access different crops, different animals? That's really interesting. It's not innovating, but it's giving it a unique spin, and it gives you another reason to keep playing.
It also opens you up and shows that your game is going to appeal to different, people. It's like, just take the way my wife and I both play Stardew. I am the one going around. I'm that completionist. I have to befriend everybody, so I'll unlock all the recipes. My wife can play for a 3-year run and not talk to a single person in town because she could not care less. She basically turns her farm into a moonshine distillery and just sells it all off. She absolutely doesn't care about the social. But someone just pointed out something in chat, and I want to ask you, is the point of this screenshot to show the transition between the magical evolution of the land? Okay. Call that out. Explain it. Because now somebody made that comment. I look at it. I'm like, okay, now I get it. But you need to explain it. You need to say, hey, look, brown, this is when the world sucks. Green, things are getting a little better. Blue, the fairies have taken over. It's put some context in there, and that will actually help a whole lot. Thank you for pointing that out, chat.
Yeah, that sounds interesting to me. That's like Okami. Have you played Okami? Oh, yeah, so rejuvenation, restoring the world as you kind of explore. It's fantastic. That's a key feature. Yeah.
Okay, so game loop. The bottom half of this slide isn't actually a loop. It's a bunch of stuff that you can do, but it doesn't necessarily, there's no arrows pointing. It's not, one thing leads to another. It's like you've got your core game loop, and there's different ways that you can, show this. I am not going to sit here and tell you that I am a digital layout expert. I have one of those on my team, and that's why, our stuff looks decent every now and then too. But I would either center that core game loop and have things spinning. I mean, I've seen developers do it that way before.
Yeah.
They have a core game loop in the middle, and then they have an expanded version showing other things going on, interlacing it. But right now, what you've got is a simple core game loop with a bunch of activities listed underneath it. And it's not it's not looping. But Omar, maybe you can explain that better than I can.
Yeah, I'm going to sound a little bit harsher, but it's not my intention to sound harsh. But basically, the way you framed all those interesting activities is purely optional. So what that says to me is that on the top, that your core experience is not really a core experience, because you start the day, you jump into the game, and it says progress. I imagine that's supposed to say progress in the story instead of process in the story. But what is a story? What do I do to drive the story? Well, in order to do that, I need to interact with quest givers. I need to meet the townsfolk, who then tell me to go and do stuff. Something needs to be restored. In order to do that, I need to get X thing to do Y thing. And then that starts to feed into those little activities on the bottom, which is what Jay is saying, where you have a core loop, then you have little things that are dependent on these individual activities, milestones. If you do those, you start to work your way through a typical session. And then the session can become, it can be broken down even further. You could then say, here's what a 10-minute session looks like. Here's what a 1 hour session looks like. Here's what the player would achieve in a week. So I think, yeah, we can't cover this during this call. Jay's totally right. I would probably do a bit of research, look at core loops for other games, other life sims. It doesn't necessarily have to be life sims. It can be other genres, and just see how they've structured their core loop. Like, just go back to your team and say, what is the player doing? What do we want them to achieve? What is fulfilling? What have they achieved? What does that lead to? And then present it that way.
As much as I hate to say this, some of the decks that I have seen that have the best explanation of complex core game loops are all free-to-play games, because they're explaining how the player is going to go through and get 15 different kinds of currencies and what they're going to do with them. The juxtaposition between the two genres is not remotely the same, but in terms of looking at a graphical layout of how complex core game loops are done, free-to-play live service games are actually, those are some of the best ones that I've seen in terms of layout. Yeah. All right, slide 8.
So first thing, we love it cozy, tiny heading, but also don't know what it means. On top of that, there aren't any real standout statements. Like, focus on farming and farm animals. You've already told me that. That's not a unique feature. No fighting system. Feels a bit odd to put that in, because I was not expecting a fighting system. But now that you've said there's no fighting system, I'm starting to question it. So I would take that out completely. Using magic for farm work, that sounds cool, but you've not told me how. So if I saw a slide before which was like, here are gameplay mechanics. This is how you farm in our game. You can levitate, I don't know, some tool to cultivate and harvest. That's really interesting. But are you doing that in your game? I don't know. The other thing, and I think Jay, you've picked up on this, so I'm going to hand over to you as well, but restores the gameplay charm of older farming games like Harvest Moon. It's very vague, because someone who's reading this may not know what Harvest Moon is, but also what is the charm of that game? Because there are a lot of life sims that do what Harvest Moon does. So I'm a bit confused at that point. Seeing the no fight system made me happy. Brilliant. Yeah, Jay, do you want to add to that? Because you've got comments.
I know exactly why you put no fighting system in there, and it's because I think virtually all life sims, except like literally, well, I mean, technically, I guess The Sims has a fighting system in it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be drowning so many people in pools. But I know why it's in there. But Omar's right. If you're not going to have one, just don't mention it. Don't bring it up. But this goes back to what I said very early. There's a lot of what's missing in this deck is the how and the why. Go into that extra little bit of detail. People want to play something older like Harvest Moon because why? In many, this is an analogy out of left field, but just stick with me. Life sims and the farming games have been around long enough that we've seen an evolution go all the way through them to the point now that we're getting back to something simple. The same way we've seen first-person shooters from the age of Doom up to the age of Fortnite get so complex that there's now an entire subgenre on Steam called boomer shooters, which I find a little offensive because I played them when I was a kid and I'm not a boomer. But there is an absolute good reason to have this stuff in there, but you need to go to that extra little step of saying, you know, why does this matter? The screenshot, now that someone has pointed out that there's different layers, that some of these screenshots are different layers, that's something I would love to see in this. You know, this
like
is
a before and after.
Yeah,
like here's the
exactly.
Here's the rundown, horrible place that you don't want to live in, and then it's like, this is how you make it cozy.
Yep.
And I
Put a
want to see that
slash through it.
transformation.
Have one
Yeah.
half of it be, you know, this is after I fixed it up. This is after. This is what it looks like when we come in there. But overall, focus on your hows and your whys.
Yeah. I was going to say, sorry, just before I jump ahead, there were two statements there. Deep world lore that will be used in future games as well. I don't think you need that. You've not mentioned lore, and you've not talked a lot about the adventuring and the story, so I'd probably take that out. The other thing I would say is, don't talk about the first in a franchise in your pitch, because that's only relevant to me if you're pitching a sequel. Like, I'm not going to see the potential of the game if I'm as a series if I'm not invested in the first game. So don't talk about something that's much further down the road. I see developers do it too often, and it's very optimistic. It's good to be optimistic, but it's too optimistic in my opinion.
You should always have a plan and be able to explain to a publisher what your plan for success is.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily need to call it out in the pitch deck.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to, already know I'm going to disagree with Omar on this, but
you put it in the notes.
I get to talk first, so I'm going to position myself as correct. I like the map. I think this speaks to me, my gamer side. I want to know that there's content in this that I'm going to be playing for a long time. I'm that player that I may enjoy a game that I play for 6 or 7 hours, but the ones I really love are the ones that I play for hundreds and thousands of hours. And yes, I have played games that I have played for thousands of hours. I like having it in there. It shows scope. The text, though, doesn't match. It comes across as unfocused. You know, so talking about the world, mentioning that it has its own lore without going into it, I actually like that. That's one of the things that I constantly tell developers to do. Tell me that you have a plan, show me that you have lore, but I don't need the book. You know, I just need to know that you've thought it through. But then you devolve into future projects, which is like the last slide. We don't necessarily need it. And when you say things like you have possible ideas, it makes you seem unfocused. And so use the map, in my opinion. Use the map, show the scope, but don't worry about future stuff and possible ideas. You always want to project the publisher that you know exactly what you want. The minute you start saying we might do this or this is a possibility or something, then it starts raising red flags with your partner, because they're like, maybe they're not 100% sure what they want, and that's going to be a concern. Omar.
Yeah. So now that you've explained why you like the map, I appreciate that. The reason why I wasn't too keen on it is because it's just a map with labels. What's more interesting to me is if the map had callouts. Like, so looking at Valheim, like I play Lego Fortnite with my kids. We need to go back into it. But what we love about that game is how you transition between the different biomes. It's like, I need to go to the lava world to get, I need certain resources, right? I need to get copper so I can make this specific shield or sword. So if you had callouts to say, in this region, this is where you get resources that would help you build your settlement, build your house. In this area, this is where you would find different magical species. And this is where more rarer items might be. I think just some kind of callouts. But the other thing I was going to say that I think is more interesting, more relevant actually, is you've talked. There's a statement here. It says, Hildina, the world in which Magical Harvest takes place, offers a lot of room for different kind of games. That's really confusing for me, because I don't know what you mean by that. Do you mean this game has games within it? So it's games within games? Or is it mini games? Or is it, hey, here is the core genre, but then it's a mix of genres, a bit like Spiritfarer, but it's like, I don't know, I'm really confused as a reader at that point. So I would either take that out if you haven't got those mini games planned and additional content. But if you do, elaborate on that. Yeah, so I just wanted to add those things as well.
See, I told you he's a publisher, and you confused him. And I know these things.
I know these things. Okay. So I don't think this slide is needed. If you've got a prototype, cool. You don't need to call out what you've done in the prototype unless you've had some kind of revelation during development where you said, this is how the game started. We had feedback. We took it to events. And the game's evolved now. We've added this. We've added this. We took it to another event. Now we've added this. There isn't a story here, so I think you should just lose it completely. And stuff like, it's going to take 18 months. That's something to put in the roadmap. So yeah, I think you should pick this up.
I would recycle this. You don't need the slide, but you do need the art. Here you have two wonderful screenshots that show variety that you can use elsewhere in this deck, and I would do that with it.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. This is where actually you've got the strongest art. Yeah. This is the strongest art in the pitch deck, in my opinion, because the menus look quite nice for the character customization. And then you're showing the NPC interactions in the world and dialogue. So then as a viewer, I'm like, this game's got lore. Like you said, right? There are stories here. There are characters. There's places to go, people to talk to. So yeah, put those in the relevant places.
I would literally put the one with the character creation very early on in the deck, because that is a very good looking character creation system, and that will get people hooked on that whole. This is my projection into this world, and there is enough variety in here for me to, create the kind of character I want to be. So I would scrap the slide. Keep the screenshots, put that character creation one specifically way up front in the top of the deck. 11, you just need to put links in here. There's a lot. You don't necessarily need to go into all of this detail. And again, your screen is very, very green. Get that variety. I mean, you can. Granted, we're looking at this on a smaller screen because we're at least on my computer, we're looking at a screen within a screen within a screen. But you can almost lose that character in that garden because that character has blue hair, has blue clothes, and is standing in a green garden. That's the gist of it. I don't think you need all of that outline in terms of this is what we've done so far, because that's going to come out of the demo anyway. And some of the stuff is superfluous, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I would say is I've reviewed live sim games before, and they can be really big, like RPGs, and live sim games can be RPGs in their own right. What I would probably have is a roadmap just saying, this is what we've built to date. We think this system is going to be huge. The dialogue system, we need a lot of text localizing. We're going to spend X amount of months on this. We need to have different activities for farming, gathering resources. You need time for that. So you'd want to call out your pockets of features and say where they sit on your roadmap. Because then a publisher will look at that and start to weigh up like what's important, what's core to this experience, what could we drop in as DLC afterwards, and prioritize getting the core experience feeling good, and then give players more content over time, because I know your roadmap is projecting way into the future, as Jay and I noticed. So I think it's just something to be aware of. And also something else to be aware of, Jay. We are only halfway through this presentation. Are we okay?
I mean, I am.
Okay, cool. We can keep going.
My wife is texting me about dinner, but I mean, I'm aside from that.
It's nearly 10:30 where I am because my kids are asleep. The house is quiet, but I'm good to go. I mean, if I wasn't doing this now, I'd be playing Fortnite, so it's cool.
See, and you're level 153, so you can chill in the first place. On this one, it gets back to the how and the why. And then there's Skyrim. And that's just like, we've done nothing but cozy cute. and now we're at Skyrim, which is not a cozy, cute game. So it's fine to have these as inspirations, but you need to go into how and why. And quite frankly, despite whatever the how and why is, I would not have Skyrim in there.
Yes, take it out completely. I would just like Jay says, you could just rework this to be an XY matrix, like the presentation we just reviewed. Show where your game sits. You've got magic as a core focus. I know for a fact there are many other magic or fantasy life sims in development right now, are about to come out. Show where you're positioning yourselves and what you're doing to stand out. But yeah, take out Skyrim.
Can I just add something here?
Yes.
I added Skyrim only because of the fantasy lore, that to project that we have this deep fantasy lore in the background, like Skyrim also has. So that's why I also just wrote down fantasy lore. So it's just meant to be based on this kind of huge lore that is behind Skyrim. Of course, we don't want to have this that huge, but it should just project that we are focusing on a more complex lore in this case. Of course, not the cozy style of Skyrim, which is not happening in Skyrim.
I would say, though, just to counter that point, Skyrim is overkill for lore, because in that game, you can collect books, which you can read. Yeah. So I don't know if your game does not seem like that type of game, in my opinion. I almost feel like the level of lore in this is probably like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom level of lore, where there's enough there at a surface level that if you go and talk to characters, you'll find out more about what happened in the past, what's happening now. I don't know. I don't know your game that well, but I just feel like Skyrim is the ultimate extreme.
Look for other similar games that have that level of lore in it. I mean, Moonstone Island might be one. I don't know. I haven't played, but it's a jarring difference to see Harvest Moon, Stardew, Story of Seasons, Katara Fables, Skyrim.
Yeah,
it's from Sesame Street when I was growing up. It's that song about one of these things is not like the other.
One of these things is not.
Okay, good. So that's an international thing. That's not just an American.
Yeah,
thing.
Yeah. I grew up with Sesame Street.
Omar.
Yes. So we're on slide 13. This is super light. I would love to see this be repurposed. I'm not keen on this image. I think you've put an image here because you needed it to fill the space. There's not much content here. I would rather see something like you've got your matrix array in the previous slide, and then here you're like, these are the players we're targeting. These players love to do this in these types of games. But those games don't have this, and this is what we've got in our game. So I feel like, repurpose it to have some kind of relevance to the audience that you're aiming for. Because I think there's a lot of overlap. You'll have like Animal Crossing fans, but then you'll have like Sims fans, and then you'll have Stardew Valley fans, and they all kind of fall in this big kind of life sim space. But there will be some things about your game that appeal to certain players, and that's where you're trying to not necessarily make a niche, but focus. Give it an identity.
I mean, mine's essentially the same. The points you've got there are fairly non-definitive. What you can do, what you want to achieve with this can be achieved by merging it with the previous slide and talking about, target players versus target, inspirations and things like that. We're on 14. Just provide links to these. You don't. It's good that you have this. Okay, let me be clear about that. But there's not enough in here that it needs to be called out in numbers, and everyone's going to go, "Oh my God, it's huge." Just simply say, here's the link to our Steam page. Here's the link to our social media following. If you haven't taken this game to TikTok yet, I would highly recommend it. We actually had a talk a couple of sessions back that's on our YouTube page from Crystal, who's doing Critter Crops, similar magic life sim thing, and she has exploded on TikTok with that game. The fact that you had very positive feedback at a showcase that I don't know which one it is very nice. It's not going to matter. It's irrelevant to the deck. No one's going to. That's not a major selling point. And the last thing, I like your target price. one of the things that we see on their consulting side of the business from indie gamers and even from publishers is that they undervalue their game. And I know a lot of that gets into, well, competition and this, that, and do we have the content? Here's the thing. We have shown in consulting runs that we've done for some of the major publishers that a higher price point will actually move more units. But moreover, you can always lower the price. Most of your unit sales are going to come from Steam sales anyway, so the price is going to be reduced. So if your sweet spot is $19.99, that's fine. Put it out at $29.99 or $24.99, and then let it lower into that sweet spot. So I do like your target price, Omar.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think put the links in. If I think, like you've said, if you have numbers that you don't think are very kind of impressive at this stage because you're quite early in development, just hold back on that. Just say we've got social presence. The other thing I was going to say is, I know Jay, you said don't talk about the positive feedback at an event. I think it's more interesting to put in some images of people playing your game at an event. If it's at PAX, make a big deal of it, right? And then probably, like we suggested with the previous pitch deck, if you have feedback, if you have data, try and present it in a way like an infographic. It's like we realize that this game really connects with, like, in terms of male female split, it's like 70% female, for example, or we found that these particular activities really connected with our players, and other games aren't doing this, so we're going to focus on those. Yeah.
All right, to answer before we go to the next one, Nolex, your question about do I have data about the higher price points? I do, none of which I can share because it's all confidential stuff. That's going to be one of those that you just have to trust me, and I know that doesn't really carry a lot of weight, but it's like I can't tell you how I know that. All right, so these two we can kind of talk in and of themselves. I mean, together, because they should probably be merged in the first place. Because at the end of the day, you're still just talking about the studio. You've got a couple of good points in here, and the one that I would highlight on this page is your coaching program that you're involved in. Much like other, incubators, accelerators, that shows that you've got backing that has a track record. Being able to say that you're part of the same program that put out Valheim and V Rising and Goat Simulators is a big, big, big point.
Yeah.
I would focus on that. Having the high level, having a company where women are the majority is, oh my God, that is so fantastic. I love that. And you should highlight it. But you can take all of this and put it into, one slide, and I'll bounce back to 15 for you, Omar. We'll just point out my points on this one. Don't mention that Sasa is an intern. Nobody needs to know. I mean, seriously. Because it's like, okay, you've got, 3 great people, and then you've got an intern. Well, you tell me she's an intern, does that mean she may not even be there like later on? And if so, why does she matter? If she's an intern, and you're using that little 3D weight thing again. And so do something with that. But yeah, just don't mention, change current team on this slide to core team. Take out the word intern.
Yeah, and also I was going to say,
you want to go back to the other one?
Yeah, she's a 3D artist. All that 3D art, I imagine, is mostly leaning on her, so she has quite a pivotal role. No?
And I'm sure she can do better than little blocks.
So yeah, I think I agree with Jay. I think the other thing I was also going to say, just going back one slide, Jay, when we were talking about the Valheim and the coaching program, text is good, but sometimes you can just put logos in. If you had the Sweden Game Arena coaching program logo there, and then you had the logos of Valheim, Goat Simulator, V Rising in there, that's more than enough. Pictures can replace text, right?
Yes, and a lot of times they're better because at the end of the day, people don't read.
Yes.
And so as they're flipping through these slides, as a lot of people are prone to do, they may not stop and read, but they're going to go, wait a minute, why the hell is the V Rising logo in here? And then they go back and like, oh, okay. So it helps catch it. And again, you've got we have a new screenshot. So vary these things in here. Did you get anything else on 15 and 16, Omar?
No.
Okay.
That's it.
Oh, you have the wrong slides. Please skip.
Oh, skip.
Oh, skipping.
I sent you a new one, but I think you missed, or something happened. It was the wrong slide or the wrong page.
Okay, good. Then we don't have to worry about all of my questions about that slide. This one, very simple. Omar and I agree. Take it out. Has no purpose.
Yeah.
And it's the same. So it's the same screenshot we saw earlier. It's just bigger now, and we have the same green and blue thing. So just kill that slide. Omar, do you want to go or you want me to go?
Yeah, there's a few thoughts on this. I think
it's this one and the next one. This is another duo.
Yeah, I don't think you need to spread a timeline over 2 slides. And if you do, you've got way too much information. And the reason why you have way too much information is because you're projecting way beyond 2025. I think you should focus on where you are right now and the near future, because a publisher, if they love the game and they're like, this has potential, they will work with you to flesh out that long-term roadmap of content. Because right now, what you have in mind is not set in stone. As soon as you sign with a publisher, they will evaluate what's there and then start to talk to you about, okay, what can we do post-launch? What's DLC? You know, if this game's going to go in early access, we don't know how long it'll stay in early access. People might want to the community might want to really engage with you. So we extend the early access by another 6 months or 12 months or however long. So everything beyond that point is kind of like up in the air. And I don't think it needs to be on the roadmap. I also think the important headlines here are highlighting the early access and when you actually want to release. But I know, Jay, you have some thoughts on that as well.
Yes, I mean, one, condense this to one slide. 2, oh my word, why are we? I mean, this is a long development cycle. Is this something y'all are doing full time, or is this a part-time thing? Because when I see this development cycle on this style of game with this size of studio, I'm like, this is not a full-time job for you all. You're going to have a very hard time finding funding if you're not telling people it's a full-time job. And so whether it is or not, you need to be really clear on, okay, this is why it's taking this long, or you need to reevaluate why it's taking this long, because it shouldn't.
Yeah. Also, quick question. Porting to console, primary Switch. So are you going to do PlayStation and Xbox as well?
Depends.
Okay.
But another thing, I mean, keep in mind, 2027, we're on Switch 2.
Yes.
So
that's what I was going to say.
I mean, you're literally pushed out far enough that you're in another console generation.
Yeah. That's the other thing as well. So it's just
that's the goal.
But I think it's interesting because, like, when we review games, we look at the technical specs of those games. You know, like what is the base, the minimum, what is your minimum right now? Is it Switch? Like this game needs to run at 60 FPS on Switch, like the current Switch, and if it does, then it's not a problem. But it's good. It's good to call that out, though. Yeah.
All right. I think this is the last one. Is this the last one?
Is it?
Oh no, it's not. No, I'm sorry.
No, it's not.
It's the last one on this page of notes. All right. Go ahead.
I think your ask that I think follows this can just be merged into this. There's probably too much information here, in my opinion. I think you can have like, we need this amount to get to early access. And that's it, really. Like, just break it down and say, this is how long it'll take. This is how many people we're going to have, and just simplify it. And then I would probably have like the pie chart or infographic. But we have comments about the pie chart as well, which follows. I don't know, Jay, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, you need to move the sum. So before I do the math on this, when I look at this slide, I think you've got an 800,000 euro game with another 265,000 euros going into post early access. That's not your case though. But the way that the slide is laid out, that's what it looks like. So you need to move that 796,500 2 blocks over. So it does look like it is the end number.
Yeah. And then connected to that point you've just made, you've said 796,000 until full release. Now that's even more confusing because early access is not full release. So you need to be clear about what your ask is, because me as a publisher, I'm going to say it now, I'm confused. Like, what are you? Do you need 800K to get to early access, or do you need 800K to finish this game to get it out on all platforms by 2027 Q4, whenever? So yeah, be very clear about what your ask is. The other thing, I guess we're on this slide now, so I guess I'll just kind of keep going. You need support for the following 4 things. I don't think you need to stagger them like steps. Just keep it clean and simple. You've not really changed the format elsewhere in the deck. Just call it out very clearly. Just indent them. The other thing, I think, with the pie chart, I think, Jay, you've got it in your comments, and I didn't add it, but you kind of answered it for me, is that you have a huge segment of your pie chart, which is salary, and you have some tiny slithers for software and fees. But salary, you can break that down into disciplines. You can talk about all kinds of specifics. So I guess I'm going to hand over to you now, Jay, because you have thoughts on that.
If your pie chart is just dominated by one piece of pie, you don't need a pie chart.
Yes.
But if you go through, like Omar says, and says, look, we need this much for production, this much for art, this much for engineering, that's different. But as it stands, as it's laid out, you don't need a pie chart to say we know the vast majority of your budget is going to go to salary. That's a given. That's every game development. Either break it down or just take it out. You're also, I didn't see this covered anywhere in the slide in terms of like things that you are handling, but in your ask, you're also going to need QA and community support. I can see you handling community support internally, but you're still going to need QA. So make sure you put that in there so the publisher doesn't go, oh, okay, they already have that. We don't have to pay for that, because otherwise they will.
Yeah, and typically with these types of games, because you've got a lot of content planned, you've got characters with stories, you've got customization, players will want to talk to you about, hey, what kind of outfits are coming out for this character? What's happening with this storyline? Are there going to be additional quests? Oh, this area of the world looks like it's got a construction sign on it or something. What's coming next? That they will have questions for you. And it might be that at some point you need someone to transition into more of a full-time role, just being a community manager for the game. And it's just good, like Jay says, for a publisher to know well in advance if we need to take that on or if you'll have someone to manage that.
Okay. So, sorry about that. Yes, I know.
I had specific instructions from IndieGameBusiness to mute my phone. And
hush! Just leave me alone. Please, just it's late in the day. I'm hungry. Here we have 5 games, 4 of which are brand new to this deck. This goes into the consistency thing. Yes, we've talked about Stardew, but we have not talked about the Disney game. We have not talked about Coral Island, Sunraven, or Harvestella. You need consistency. So if you're talking about the games that your gamers are playing, or the games that inspired this game, or the games that you're going to be using as comps, they need to be consistent. Don't bring something in here because you get to this slide and you're like, well, why are we talking about Coral Island? We haven't talked about Coral Island the entire thing. The other one is line them up. So make one nice graph and have Stardew Valley's icon lined up with the Stardew Valley data. But more specifically, go through, reevaluate all the games that you're using as inspiration, as target audience, as comps, and have consistency all the way through your deck.
Yeah. one other thing I'm going to say, there is one of these games is not like the others. You have a Disney game in there. The the revenue from that is going to skew everything else on this page.
Except Stardew Valley.
You accept Stardew Valley. However, no, in the sense that you've got indie games. You've got indie games, and then you've got the behemoth of Disney backing their game, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. I know Stardew Valley, but Stardew Valley is old. It's been around for a long time.
It is.
Disney is new. Disney Dreamlight Valley has huge backing. They've got their IPs. They can do whatever they want with that. So I don't think it needs to live in this space. I would take it out. There are plenty of other alternative indie life sims that you can put on here. And I guess that just kind of goes out to like all indie developers who are watching. Try and avoid putting AAA games in your decks. It will totally skew the data. I know Stardew Valley's got crazy numbers. I can see the number there, but it doesn't make sense because they have all the IP.
Stardew is a weird one because by every rule that we usually dictate in terms of what you should include, it should not be included. It's too old and it's sold too many units. But at the same time, if you're pitching me a life sim, a farming game, and you don't even mention Stardew Valley, it's weird. And there's no rational, there's no logical explanation for me to tell you that because it does completely fly in the face of everything else I've said. But it's like you almost have to. There's no other genre that's like that. It's not like, but Stardew Valley, everybody's going to be like, okay, so how are you like, this? But yet, the Disney stuff I would pull. I'm not even familiar with Harvestella. I mean, that's my own fault.
I agree with you. I've not heard of that one. I should know, but I've not played Harvestella.
So, Isa, why is that one in there? What is it?
It's a farming fantasy game with magic from Square Enix.
Okay, I wouldn't have that in there.
Okay, so that's Square Enix. Square Enix are a little bit strange because they try and make these games that are sort of trying to pass themselves off as indie, but aren't. And I saw some article today, I think, where they is it Square Enix? I'll have to double check, but they have games that.
Now that she says that, if you had just shown me that logo and said, "What publisher do you think this is from?" I would have said Square Enix. That is a Square Enix logo.
It's that kind of Final Fantasy.
It does. It's like, hey, we got Final Fantasy, and we're going to drop you on a farm with a bunch of chocobos now. Don't put it in there. Go to grab something else relevant. But
there's so many. Like my time at Sandrock, my time at Porsche. There's so many equivalents like that, like Coral Island. So yeah, I put them in there.
Last slide.
Cool. Okay. Do you remember at the start where I said this image appears a number of times throughout the deck? This is the nighttime setting of that image. I don't think you need it. You've got stronger imagery elsewhere, or pick something else. From your art where you've got some really good 2D art. I'd put that in there. Prototype link. If you've got a playable, put that in. Contact person. That's great. I think your role should be in there, so I know who I'm talking to. Is it the creative director? Is it, is it the CEO? I'm probably going to be the one reaching out. And if I know that the person I'm talking to talks the same language as me and maybe is the creative director, then we can talk more about the game and specific features and things like that. That's all really. I mean, anything else, Jay?
Don't use a Gmail address. Seriously, if you have a website, use your URL. It makes you immediately sound more professional. And along that same lines, if you don't have a LinkedIn page for your company, take 10, 20 minutes, make one. It's one of the things that it's part of that secondary back checking that publishers, investors, consultants like me do to make sure you're legitimate. But the first one is don't send a Gmail address, even if it's just, info@moonflamegames.com or whatever your URL is, use that instead. But yeah, that's it. That's all I got. You've got great artists. It's obvious. What I would actually do on this slide is have them put together a piece of art with the characters waving in an environment in the background with a magical cow or something like that.
Yeah.
As kind of like a hey goodbye, because it's obvious you all can do great art. Just show it and show that more variety overall on the deck. Focus on your hows, on your whys, and less monochromatic art. And do you have questions for us?
At first, I want to thank you for your constructive feedback, definitely. I'm not on your side with every point you mentioned, because in my case, I have more background, of course. So for me, some stuff is, obvious, some stuff not. I also want to thank you regarding the art, because everything I did myself in the last 2 years, and I learned in this two years also creating this art.
Wow.
So
That's impressive.
thanks. But I still know that art is our weak point, because I can't make it coherent. Like you said in the first image, my cover art at the moment, it's just put together art with the best stuff I had.
But yeah.
So I could totally see these points, definitely. I'm now really curious what you would say about my meeting pitch deck, because this is basically the deck I thought I sent to publishers so that they can get a rough overview about everything. And in my meeting pitch, I'm going into the details you wanted to see, basically.
So for a meeting pitch deck, if you pull out and you just condense some of these slides, because you have to keep in mind in a meeting when you're at GDC, for example, you may have a 30-minute meeting, but you really only have a 15 or 20-minute meeting.
Yes.
People are going to get there late. People are going to leave there early. And if you're in somewhere like the W, for God's sakes, do not schedule meetings at the W. But, when you're in one of the hotels, people are going to be interrupting you constantly. But if you condense down, you've got 24 slides in this.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. If you can bake that down to 12 to 15, but you can do it. I swear to God, Omar and I trimmed 5 or 6 slides out of this thing.
Yeah.
So you can absolutely do it. The thing, and just churn through it. You need to be able to pitch this deck in 7 minutes to do a effective meeting, because that gives time for, hi, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is a studio. Here's our game. Answer questions. But you can absolutely turn this into a meeting deck. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I see so many pitch decks. Buff J and I, we see hundreds of thousands, right? Getting to the thousands. Basically, these types of games, you can get them down to 12 to 15 slides. The best pitch decks are the ones that don't really go above that number. Once you start to go above that, you start to lose interest, and you start to waffle, and you start to lose focus. And then me as a reader, I start to forget what I just saw, because there's so much content there, nothing stands out. But as you saw with the pitch deck previous, it's almost half the number, right? I don't know how many was it for the zombie rollers, Jay? How many slides?
Hold on.
And we suggested taking out 3, which was
18.
the awards.
Yeah, there were 18 in that deck.
So take the 3 out. That's 15. That I can see that game being pitched during a GDC meeting. And Jay's totally right. You've got 15 minutes. If it's a half-an-hour meeting, you're going to lose 15 minutes from just intros and just settling in, and people getting late and arriving late, etc. So yeah, it sounds scary, but you guys can do it. I'm sure you can.
And trust me, after the 50th time you have pitched this that week, it's going to be muscle memory to you anyway. Yeah. And keep in mind, a meeting at GDC and a pitch meeting is not the end all be all. You're going to have to send this deck over to the publisher after it's done, because I can guarantee you, after I sit down and look at 100 different games that week, because I'll be there all week, I've got meetings all day, not even counting pitch sessions that I'm in, where I've got an entire country's worth of delegations that are showing me games in an hour and a half. Remembering this stuff is very, very difficult. So you're going to have to follow up, anyway, and you can have that deeper deck when you follow up, because that's going to get passed around, and you're not going to be there to dictate and describe everything that's in there. But what you've got here as a basis, you can absolutely boil down into, a quick deck to do in a meeting.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you so much.
How are
Very
you feeling,
welcome.
by the way? We've not done a check-in with you. Like, are you okay? I feel like, Jay, we need to have like therapy sessions after all of our
No. It's fine. It's fine. I think it's also just interesting to hear new thoughts about it. So yeah, it gives a new direction at least, definitely.
Awesome.
And we'll always say this: if you go back and you do another pass edit and you want to fire it over to Omar and I, we'll completely take a look at it and give you feedback.
I thought you were going to say we'll completely take it apart again.
I don't want to do that to somebody twice. That's but no, and as we told Ding, thank you for doing this, because this ain't easy. You have bared your soul and your project to the internet. And, while I personally think it's a good thing because it's going to get you out there, a little more visibility is good. It ain't easy. And I know it ain't easy. And so I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely.
All right.
Cool.
So with that, we're done.
Yes,
16th,
we are.
15th or 16th Indie Game Business Sessions conference session over. Thank you all. Big, huge shout out to my wonderful team who helps me do this, for our media and marketing partners, Michael and his team over at Vicarious, and for our good friends at Meet to Match, who we adore so much, and we get to see again when we head out to San Francisco in a few weeks. Thank you, everybody. Y'all are the reason we do this. Send us your feedback. Let us know what we can do to make them better, what things you want to see that you didn't see, and we'll try to make it happen.
Cool.
Night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.